The Amanda Knox case has intrigued and baffled people for years. I mean, it was an international sensation. Did this young woman murder her roommate in cold blood in a different country? All of the evidence seemingly pointed directly to her, but now we know that she was falsely charged. She has been speaking out publicly for years, and now there is a whole show based around this story. So I thought we have to cover it, and we are going to be diving deep. So get ready, grab a snack, sit back, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cult, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. Now, we've been focusing primarily on cults all summer long, so this might be a pretty harsh left turn for some of you, but I hope you will stick around because I honestly don't know if you're going to find another deep dive that's this long on this topic. Of course, unless you watch Amanda's documentary, because it's all very, very fascinating. And there is still so much speculation surrounding this case where people still believe that Amanda might be guilty. But at the same time, I guess you just never know. So, by the end of this video, I hope to present you with all of the information across the entire interwebs, and then you can come to whatever conclusion seems to fit best for you. So, let's just jump right into it. Now, when we talk about the Amanda Knox case, sometimes we totally forget the victim. Her name was Meredith Susanna Cara Kercher, and she was born in South London in 1985 and grew up in a close knit British family. She was bright and hardworking, and she attended the University of Leeds, where she studied European politics and Italian, harboring dreams of working for the EU or becoming a journalist. Her love of Italy was well known. She had fallen in love with that country during a school exchange trip and even spent a summer with an Italian family as a teenager. In late August 2007, 21-year-old Mez, as friends called her, arrived in the medieval university town of Perugia for an Erasmus year abroad. She moved into the cottage at Via della Pergola 7, sharing the upstairs flat with three other women: two Italian professionals in their late 20s, and an American exchange student named Amanda Knox. She was described by those who knew her as caring, witty, and intelligent. Meredith embraced life in Italy. She juggled her studies in modern history and politics with an active social life. She worked as a part time barmaid and tour guide and faithfully phoned her mother in England every day. For Meredith, Perugia was an adventure, a chance to immerse herself in Italian culture and language, which she adored. Now, Amanda Marie Knox had embarked on her own Italian adventure that fall. Born in 1987 and raised in Seattle, Washington, Amanda was known by friends for her independence and adventurous spirit. She first visited Italy on a family holiday as a teenager and became enamored with its beauty and culture, even citing the book Under the Tuscan Sun as inspiration for her dreams. By 2007, Amanda was a 20-year-old student at the University of Washington who seized the chance to study abroad in Italy for a year. In mid September, she moved into the Perugia cottage 10 days after Meredith had settled in. The two young women were close in age and shared the upstairs flat with the Italians, Laura and Filomena. By all accounts, Meredith and Amanda got along well. They were friendly roommates who would occasionally spend evenings together, but they each did have their own circle of friends. In late October 2007, just about a month into her stay, Amanda met Raphael Solicito, a 23-year-old Italian computer science student at a classical music concert. Raphael was shy, bookish, and instantly smitten with Amanda. The pair began dating and were scarcely apart in the days that followed. As October turned into November, both Meredith and Amanda were thriving in Perugia. Meredith was excelling in her courses and bonding with fellow exchange students, and Amanda was balancing work at a local bar with Italian classes at the University for Foreigners, and she was enjoying her new romance. They lived in a simple, whitewashed cottage on a hillside overlooking Perugia, a picturesque setting that bellied the darkness that was about to descend. The stage was quietly being set for a tragedy that would upend both of their lives and captivate the entire world. The night of November 1st, 2007, All Saints' Day, began unremarkably in Perugia, with the Italian roommates and the downstairs neighbors all out of town for the holiday. Meredith and Amanda had the house at Via della Pergola largely to themselves. Meredith joined some British friends for a low key pasta dinner, while Amanda made plans to spend the night at Raphael's apartment. That evening, Meredith walked home from her friend's flat, a route that took her along dimly lit medieval streets toward the cottage. She parted ways with a friend around 8:45 p.m., just a few hundred yards from home, and was seen heading toward Via della Pergola in the drizzling rain. It was the last time her friends would see her alive. Amanda's account of that night, which was later scrutinized in minute detail, is that she never returned to the cottage at all until the next morning. She arrived at Raphael's apartment around 9 p.m. The young couple cooked a simple dinner, watched a movie, and smoked some marijuana before dozing off around midnight. Amanda would say that they spent the entire night together in Raphael's small studio flat. And in the meantime, Meredith likely reached the cottage by around 9 p.m. And what transpired inside her bedroom later that night has been the subject of endless reconstruction and debate. Neighbors would report hearing a piercing scream sometime between 10 and 11:30 p.m. and then unsettling silence. Meredith did not answer any phone calls or messages after about 9:30 p.m. In the dark and rain, someone, or maybe more than one person, had attacked the British student in her own room, turning the cottage into a crime scene. Late the next morning, November 2nd, Amanda Knox awoke at Raphael's and around 10 a.m. returned to Via della Pergola 7. What she encountered immediately set off alarm bells. The front door was standing unlocked and slightly ajar, which was unusual. Stepping inside, Amanda called out for Meredith, but got no response. The house was quiet, and in the bathroom that Amanda shared with Meredith, she noticed a few drops of blood in the sink and on the floor. There was also an ominous sight. Someone had left feces in the toilet of the second bedroom, which belonged to the Italian roommates. Amanda found Meredith's bedroom door closed, but assumed her friend was sleeping in. Puzzled by all of this, but not necessarily panicked, Amanda took a quick shower in the bloody bathroom, then left the house to return to Raphael's place, still totally unaware of the horror on the other side of Meredith's locked door. When Amanda arrived back at Raphael's, she told him about the strange signs at the cottage, and Raphael grew alarmed. The blood drops and open door sounded serious, and Meredith still wasn't answering calls. So the two hurried back to Via della Pergola. It was now approaching noon. Now, Raphael immediately noticed a window in one of the Italian roommates' bedrooms had been shattered. Broken glass totally littered the room. And oddly, many of the glass shards were on top of the clothes and items in the room, as if the window had been broken after the room was already in disarray. To Raphael, it looked like a burglary had taken place. So, growing concerned, he and Amanda banged on Meredith's bedroom door, shouting her name, but they got no answer. The door was locked tight. Raphael tried to force it open, even throwing his shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. At 12:51 p.m., Raphael called Italy's emergency number to report a possible break-in and maybe even a missing person. Amanda phoned one of the Italian roommates, Filomena, frantic about this bizarre situation. Filomena and a friend raced back home to help. So just after 1 p.m., as a light rain fell, Filomena Romanelli arrived to absolute chaos at the cottage. Fearing something was very wrong, Filomena demanded that Meredith's door be broken down. When the police, who by then had arrived, hesitated to act, Filomena's male friend took matters into his own hands. At around 1:15 p.m., he kicked open Meredith's door. And what they saw inside was a nightmare. Meredith Kercher was lying lifeless on the floor, covered by a blood-soaked duvet. The 21-year-old had been stabbed and brutally attacked, her throat cut so deeply that it was nearly severed. She was partially unclothed, and there were signs of SA. Blood spatter stained the walls and floor of the small bedroom. And immediately, the reality set in for those gathered. Meredith had been murdered. Italian police sealed off the crime scene immediately, and of course soon, news spread through Perugia's student community. Amanda Knox, who had been standing outside in a state of increasing distress, collapsed into Raphael's arms, sobbing. Within hours, the quiet cottage on Via della Pergola swarmed with investigators, forensic police, and press. A tragic whodunit was underway. From the moment Meredith's body was discovered, the Perugia police faced enormous pressure to find her killer. Almost immediately, the investigation honed in on suspicious details that suggested the crime might be as simple as a burglary gone wrong. The break-in at the cottage with the broken window in Philomena's room struck detectives as odd. Valuable items like laptops and jewelry had been left behind, and the pattern of glass shards suggested that the window might have been broken after the room was ransacked rather than before. So, to investigators, it all looked totally staged. Attention turned quickly to those closest to the victim, including her 20-year-old American roommate. In their initial statements on November 2nd, Amanda Knox and Raphael Solicito told police that they had been together at his apartment all night and had no idea what happened to Meredith. Yet inconsistencies began to emerge. Phone records showed that Raphael had called the police after 12:30 p.m. on November 2nd, but in an earlier call he had made to his sister that day, he told her, "We found a foot," unquote, even though he hadn't even yet seen Meredith's body. So it was small discrepancies like this that raised investigators' suspicions. Moreover, officers on scene noted what they felt was peculiar behavior by Amanda. A young policewoman would later testify that Amanda seemed oddly detached. At one point, she was doing yoga stretches or a random cartwheel in the police station corridor and was even seen kissing Raphael outside the murder scene. It all seemed way too suspicious. To Italian authorities, this comportment was not what they expected from a traumatized roommate. Fairly or not, Amanda's demeanor planted seeds of doubt in their minds. And as days went by with no arrest, the Perugia Homicide Squad, led by Chief Inspector Monica Napoleoni and Prosecutor Giuliano Mignini, grew convinced that the crime was not the work of a single intruder. They theorized that Meredith had been killed during a group attack involving more than one person. Under intense scrutiny was the locked room aspect. Could an outsider have gained entry without an accomplice inside? Attention also began to get focused on a local named Dia Patrick Lumumba, the Congolese owner of the bar where Amanda worked part-time. Amanda had texted this person the night of the murder about her not coming into work. Although the text itself seemed pretty innocuous, all it said was, "See you later, have a good night," In translation, it was taken by police as possible arrangement to meet later that night. And as the investigation tightened, Amanda and Raphael were called back to the police station for further questioning on November 5th, 4 days after the murder occurred. What happened in that overnight interrogation would itself become one of the case's greatest controversies. All night long, from November 5th through 6th, 2007, Perugia police questioned Amanda Knox in a high pressure, chaotic session without a lawyer or official interpreter present. By her account, multiple officers shouted questions in Italian, a language that she was just beginning to learn, while one woman officer slapped her on the back of the head each time she, quote, didn't remember correctly. Investigators insisted that Raphael had confessed she left his apartment that night, which turned out to be a false claim, and that she needed to recall what happened. And in a state of exhaustion and confusion, the 20-year-old Amanda reached a breaking point. In the early hours of November 6th, she told police a shocking story. She said that she had been at the cottage when Meredith was killed, not with Raphael, but with Patrick Lumumba. In this sudden recollection, Amanda claimed that Patrick, her boss, had met her at the cottage around 9 p.m. after Meredith let him in, and that Patrick attacked Meredith in her bedroom while Amanda cowered in the kitchen, covering her ears. She even signed a written statement to this effect. The police, they had what they wanted: a confession like statement implicating two suspects. Within mere hours, the case was closed, according to the authorities. On November 6, 2007, Amanda Knox, Raphael Solicito, and Patrick Lumumba were arrested on the suspicion of the murder of Meredith Kercher. The news made instant headlines worldwide. Amanda was the fresh faced American student and was paraded past cameras into a police car. Raphael, the bespectacled Italian boyfriend, looked bewildered as he was led away, and Patrick protested vehemently that he had nothing to do with any of this. As it turned out, Patrick had an airtight alibi. He was tending bar at Le Chic the entire night of the murder, confirmed by numerous witnesses. So after 2 weeks behind bars, he was fully exonerated and released on November 20th when a university professor came forward to attest that he was at the bar that night. He would later be described bitterly as the case's forgotten victim, and Amanda, for her part, immediately retracted the bizarre story about Patrick. In a written note after her interrogation, she pleaded that she was confused and had barely understood the questions in Italian, saying the scenario of Patrick killing Meredith was a vision that police had forced on her. But the damage was done. Amanda Knox was now effectively seen as a confessed suspect in her roommate's murder, a damning label that would stick, despite her later claims that the confession was coerced under duress. As Amanda and Raphael sat in prison in the weeks after their arrest, investigators were not resting. Critical forensic evidence from the crime scene was coming to light, evidence that pointed to a third person entirely. On November 4th, police had found a bloody handprint on a pillow under Meredith's body and fingerprints on her possessions that did not match with Meredith, Amanda, or Raphael. DNA testing soon identified the mysterious fingerprints as belonging to Rudy Guede, a 20-year-old man from the Ivory Coast who was known around Perugia. Rudy had a history of petty crime and breaking and entering. In fact, he had been caught burglarizing a law office in town just weeks before the murder. He also had acquaintances in common with the downstairs Italian boys. Crucially, Guede's DNA would later be found inside Meredith's body and around her bedroom, making him inextricably linked to the murder. But by the time his name emerged, Guede had fled Italy. And this person, this guy, is insanely creepy. I have found some videos on YouTube of him posting online. Very creepy. On November 19th, 2007, Interpol tracked the fugitive to Germany. Guede had taken a train to Strasbourg and then traveled on to Germany shortly after the murder. He was arrested on the city of Mainz on November 20th and then extradited back to Italy in early December. With Guede in custody, the puzzle of that night took a new turn. Investigators now posited that all three suspects, Amanda, Raphael, and Rudy, had all acted together in some capacity. They could not let it go that, perhaps Amanda Knox had nothing to do with this. Thanks to assumptions and media frenzy surrounding Amanda, nobody could let it go. No one. So, the theory of this trio of murderers who all, for whatever reason, were targeting Meredith was advanced by prosecutor Giuliano Mignini. He suggested that Meredith had been killed during a drug fueled SA involving Amanda, Raphael, and Rudy. According to this conjecture, Amanda might have resented Meredith, perhaps over household tensions or jealousies, and facilitated an assault or at least participated in one along with the two men. There was talk of Knox being a jealous femme fatale, and even wild speculation about occult rituals. While concrete evidence of a motive was scarce, these sensational ideas took hold. The local Perugia press began painting Amanda as a promiscuous, foxy seductress who led a violent sex game gone wrong. It was a narrative almost too lurid to believe. And yet, as the case proceeded to trial, much of the prosecution's argument would hinge on characterizations and circumstantial inferences of this nature. In the year following the murder, Italian authorities prepared a formidable case against Amanda Knox and Raphael Solicito, even as Rudy Guede was dealt with totally separately. Interesting that they are all dealt with separately, isn't it? Guede opted for a fast track trial, which is a legal shortcut in Italy that often yields a lighter sentence in exchange for foregoing a full trial. In October 2008, Rudy was convicted of the essay and murder of Meredith Kercher and sentenced to 30 years in prison. An appeals court later reduced his term to 16 years for whatever reason. Now, notably, in convicting Guede, the judge's report asserted that he did not act alone, leaving open the question of accomplices. And by then, all eyes were on the upcoming trial of Knox and Solicito. In January 2009, Amanda and Raphael went on trial before a panel of 2 judges and 6 jurors in the Corte d'Assise of Perugia. The proceedings, conducted in Italian, unfolded over the course of the year with intense media attendance. Prosecutor Mignini laid out his theory that on the night of November 1st, Knox and Solicito had visited Meredith's room with Guede, and that Meredith was held down and stabbed when what began as an essay escalated to lethal violence. The prosecution leaned heavily on forensic evidence and on Knox's own dubious statements during her interrogation. They pointed to the break-in being staged, Knox's false accusation of Lumumba, and alleged lies as consciousness of guilt. Now, Knox's defense vigorously denied these claims, arguing that Amanda was a scared 20-year-old who had been railroaded by aggressive police tactics and a rush to judgment. All of this happening in a foreign country where she barely speaks the language. She's not a fluent person. She's there to study the language more. So I can totally understand if people are screaming at her in Italian, she might just be like, I don't know what's going on. I need to say and do whatever I can to get out of the situation. So that's maybe what she did. Solicito's defense similarly maintained that he had no part in the crime and had been at home. And what's so ironic is they would have been each other's alibis, but if they were in it together, there's no way that they could have been each other's alibis. The lack of any of Knox's or Solicito's genetic material in Meredith's bedroom was a cornerstone of the defense. But nevertheless, on December 4th, 2009, the court delivered a stunning verdict: guilty on all counts. Amanda Knox was convicted of Meredith's murder, S.A., and of maliciously accusing Patrick Lumumba, and she was sentenced to 26 years in prison, 25 for murder, and 1 extra year for the defamation charge. She gets more time in prison than the man that actually murdered her. Because remember, he got downgraded to 16 years. So she's got 10 years on him. That's wild. Rafael Solicito was convicted of the same crimes and was also given 25 years. And the courtroom gasped as Knox, who was only 22 at the time, broke into tears and later said that she felt like her life had been ripped away in that moment. The verdict rested on pieces of evidence that to outside observers seemed very thin. A supposed speck of Meredith's DNA on a kitchen knife from Solicito's kitchen, Solicito's DNA on a bra clasp found in Meredith's room, and various circumstantial elements. The Italian jury apparently accepted the prosecution's narrative of a group attack. So when the verdict was announced, some in the gallery even applauded, a reflection of how thoroughly Knox had been vilified in some of the press. But abroad, especially in the United States, the conviction raised eyebrows. Many American commentators and forensic experts argued that the evidence against Knox and Solicito was deeply flawed and incompatible with their involvement, and that the two had been convicted more on character assassination than on fact. This one case began to strain U.S. Italy relations, with U.S. senators and diplomats quietly voicing concerns. Knox's family proclaimed that she was innocent and vowed to fight for her. Under Italy's justice system, a conviction is not considered final until the appeals process is totally exhausted. Amanda and Raphael remained in prison, but immediately appealed the verdict. Their first appeal was heard in 2011 by the Perugia Court of Appeals, effectively a retrial of the case. This appellate trial would prove to be the dramatic turning point. The new judges ordered an independent review of the two key DNA traces that had underpinned the original conviction: the knife and that bra clasp. Two respected forensic experts from Rome's Sapienza University, Dr. Carla Vecchiotti and Dr. Stefano Conti, were appointed to re-examine the DNA evidence. Their findings, delivered in June 2011, were nothing short of devastating to the prosecution's case. They reported, quote, numerous basic errors, unquote, and breaches of international protocols by the police forensic lab, and concluded that the genetic evidence was unreliable or downright invalid. The alleged tiny DNA fragment of Meredith on the kitchen knife was too low in quantity to be conclusive and could easily have been contamination. And indeed, there was evidence that forensic analyst Patrizia Stefanoni had tested multiple samples in the same lab, raising some contamination risks. Stefanoni had also admitted in court that she never retested that trace to confirm it was Meredith's DNA, something the independent experts flagged as a serious error. Yeah, I'll say. Now, as for the bra clasp said to carry Solicito's DNA, it had been left on Meredith's bedroom floor for 46 days before being collected. By then, the crime scene had been visited by numerous people, and video showed the clasp itself was inadvertently kicked around during evidence collection. The review deemed that the bra clasp DNA was just contamination as well. In short, the two linchpins of the prosecution's forensic case were totally discredited. During hearings, Dr. Vecchiotti methodically explained how the police labs failed to adhere to standard procedures, prompting an enraged response from the original forensic police. At one point, Stefanoni even threatened legal action to defend her reputation. But the writing was on the wall. On October 3rd, 2011, after closing arguments and 11 hours of deliberation, the Perugia Appeals Court announced its decision. In a packed courtroom with TV cameras broadcasting worldwide, the judge declared that the convictions for murder were overturned. Amanda Knox and Rafael Solicito were acquitted of killing Meredith Kercher. Amanda, now 24, erupted into sobs, repeating "thank you" in Italian. Rafael slumped in relief. After nearly 4 years behind bars, they were free. The appellate judges cited lack of evidence and the new expert report, effectively saying that the prosecution's case had not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. However, the court did uphold one lesser aspect. Amanda's conviction for maliciously accusing Patrick Lumumba did remain intact, and with it, a 3-year sentence, which she had, already served. But that aside, the young woman from Seattle was suddenly absolved of murder. Outside the courthouse, a scrum of reporters caught a tearful Amanda declaring, "Meredith was my friend. I didn't do what they said I did." She was whisked back to prison to gather her belongings, and within hours, both Amanda and Raphael were released. Can you imagine the emotional, inner, and probably outer turmoil you would be experiencing? Like, first, you're thrust into prison for murdering your friend after being pressured by police into giving a false confession. You probably are aware that the media is painting you as this like sex crazed lunatic who is literally out for blood with potential satanic panic origins. And then you're stuck in a foreign country jail cell for years. You're finally exonerated, and they're just like, okay, here's the open door to the streets of Italy, where everyone probably still has this image of you being this terrible seductress murderer. Like, it would be just, uh, it would be so overwhelming. Now, the next day, Amanda Knox flew home to the United States and was greeted by yet another frenzy of media and also supporters upon landing in Seattle. For a moment, it appeared the saga had ended in vindication. But the wheels of Italian justice had not finished turning. In an unexpected and extraordinary move, Italy's Supreme Court reviewed the case in 2013 after an appeal by the prosecution. On March 26, 2013, the High Court annulled the 2011 acquittals, citing procedural problems and arguing that the appeals court had overlooked some evidence. It feels just like, it just feels like people who were just mad that they lost and made to look stupid. So they're kind of like forcing the court's hand to overturn the appeal. I don't know. It just feels like not even based in real evidence. It's more based in like bruised egos. So the Supreme Court's written reasoning criticized what it called, quote, manifest illogicalities, unquote, in the acquittal decision. It was almost unheard of. It was just a roller coaster of verdicts. You're guilty, you're not guilty, surprise, you're guilty again. So Amanda, safe in Seattle, now faced the prospect of yet another trial, while Raphael in Italy remained under the shadow of the law. A retrial was ordered, and this time it would take place in Florence in late 2013. By early 2014, the case against Knox and Solicito was back before a new panel of judges in Florence. Neither defendant was present in person, luckily. And this Florence court, led by Judge Alessandro Nancini, took a much harsher view of the evidence. On January 30th, 2014, it reinstated the guilty verdicts, convicting Knox and Solicito again of Meredith's murder. The judges even increased Amanda's sentence to 28 and a half years and Raphael's to 25 years, factoring in the upheld slandering conviction. So the yo-yo of outcomes totally perplexed observers, and it really makes me grateful for the double jeopardy rule here in the States where you can't be convicted of the same crime twice, because this is just like wild. But seriously, how could one court see reasonable doubt where another one saw proof of guilt? This Florence court's logic leaned on an argument that Meredith's multiple stab wounds implied more than one attacker, as if one person can't impose multiple stab wounds on another human. So they reasoned that Guede could not have acted alone, and by elimination, Knox and Salicito must have been the accomplices. It just feels like shoddy police work. Like, this is just my opinion coming through, but it just feels like to me they didn't start the investigation on the right foot. There was a lot of in and out, people walking into the apartment, people exiting the apartment, people placing judgment, the public kind of wanting a conviction, like the local public in Italy wanting to convict a foreign American because they're painting her as this, dark, feminine energy, Satan worshiper, whatever it was that they decided to do. It just goes to show that public opinion really can skew decision making in the law. So on March 27th, 2015, Italy's court issued the long-awaited final ruling. In a dramatic climax to the 7.5-year legal saga, the Supreme Court annulled the convictions of Amanda and Raphael, this time definitively with no possibility of further retrial. Knox and Salicito were legally exonerated of the murder of Meredith Kercher. The High Court's ruling was notable not only for the acquittal itself, but for the scathing critique it leveled at the case. In their written reasons document, filed a few months later, the Supreme Court judges blasted not just the investigation, but also the lower courts for the stunning flaws and amnesia they had in handling the evidence. They noted a complete lack of biological traces connecting Knox or Salicito to the crime and called this a glaring hole in the case that was purportedly about a violent struggle. The court was unambiguous. The presence of multiple attackers had not been proven, and no reliable evidence established that Knox and Salicito were involved at all. In fact, the judges highlighted that virtually all evidence pointed to one person, Rudy Guede, and that the theory of a coordinated trio attack was unsupported by hard facts. Particularly harsh was the court's dismissal of the prosecution's argument that Knox and Salicito might have somehow cleaned the crime scene of their own DNA while leaving Guede's. It was considered to be illogical, and the judges noted that such selective cleaning would be impossible. Yeah, how do they know what they touched versus what Rudy touched? You know what I mean? They censured investigators for succumbing to media pressure and rushing to pin the blame rather than methodically seeking the truth. The Supreme Court invoked the Italian legal principle of assoluzione per insufficienza di proof. Essentially, it was an acquittal due to insufficient evidence under Article 530 of the Procedure Code, equivalent to in America having not guilty by reasonable doubt. In Italy, this is a totally full acquittal, and the court ordered that no further proceedings would ever be taken. So after years of seesaw judgments, Amanda and Raphael were finally free once and for all. Their nightmare was finally over. Knox said in a statement that day that she was grateful to have her life back. But the final Supreme Court ruling did leave one aspect intact: Amanda's conviction for criminal slander against Patrick Lumumba. All Italian courts agreed that regardless of the interrogation context, she had knowingly accused an innocent man on November 6, 2007. Because she'd already served 3 years for this during her pre-trial detention, no additional prison time was required. But still, that charge became the one stain on Knox's legal record. In a separate proceeding, she was actually tried for slandering the police by claiming that she was hit during her interrogation. But she was acquitted of that in 2016. The courts accepted that Knox's claim of mistreatment was not proven to be a lie. But for slandering Lumumba, Knox remained convicted and years later would continue trying to clear that last accusation. Now, when the acquittal for the murder came in 2015, Meredith Kercher's family expressed profound dismay at the outcome. They had sat through multiple trials only to see no one legally held responsible for Meredith's murder except Rudy Guede, who by then had a definitive 16-year sentence. The Kercher family lawyer, Francesco Maresca, lamented that the flip-flop process was a defeat for the Italian justice system and that the truth of Meredith's killing remained elusive. And indeed, the case's convoluted journey, guilty, then innocent, then guilty again, then innocent again, was widely seen as an embarrassment for Italy's courts. Even the final ruling acknowledged that a full reconstruction of the crime had become impossible and that any further answers of certainty were precluded by the passage of time and investigative missteps. In the eyes of many, the Amanda Knox saga highlighted the perils of a justice system under intense public gaze, and it would prompt considerable soul searching in Italy. Now, often lost amid the spotlight on Knox and Solicito was the man who undeniably left his mark on the crime scene, Rudy Guede. Guede was the only person to be definitively convicted of Meredith Kercher's murder, yet his role and the question of accomplices became a lingering mystery. So who was this guy? At 20 years old, Guede had lived in Italy since age 5 after his family immigrated from the Ivory Coast. He grew up largely in Perugia and was raised partly by school teachers and a local family after his own father returned to Africa. By 2007, he had fallen in with a rough crowd and had minor run-ins with the law. He was known to frequent the basketball court in the piazza near Via della Pergola and had met the Italian men who lived downstairs from Meredith and Amanda. In fact, on at least one occasion in mid-October, Amanda and Meredith had encountered Guede at the neighbor's flat when they all hung out playing music once. He was an acquaintance, albeit a peripheral one. Importantly, he had a reputation for petty crime. In the weeks before the murder, he'd been caught burglarizing a law office with a knife and stole a laptop and phone, a crime for which he was not promptly prosecuted due to bureaucratic delays. On the night of November 1st, 2007, Guede had no solid alibi. After Meredith was found dead and forensic results started coming in, the evidence against him was overwhelming. His bloody palm print was discovered on a pillow under Meredith's body. DNA matching Guede's was found inside Meredith's body, on her bra, and on her sweatshirt, signs of sexual contact and violence. And it was his feces in the toilet, indicating that he used the bathroom and hadn't flushed. It was as if Rudy had left his calling card at the scene and almost like he wanted to get caught. When he was arrested in Germany, he initially made admissions that placed him at the cottage during the murder, but then backtracked and shifted blame to others. In his version, he and Meredith had consensually fooled around that evening, and while he was in the bathroom, an unknown assailant, whom he later hinted might have been Amanda's boyfriend, attacked Meredith. Guede claimed that he emerged to find Meredith bleeding and tried to help her, getting that blood on his hands, but then fled in a panic when he heard someone coming in. This self-serving story didn't match the forensic facts, though, which indicated that he had participated in the assault. However, it conveniently implicated Knox and Solicito too by suggestion, which aided the prosecution's narrative. Guede never named them explicitly at trial, but he also never exonerated them either. So this left this big cloud of insinuation. Years later, he would more explicitly accuse Amanda in interviews and then try to backtrack, with his statements consistently being inconsistent. Guede's case was handled quickly. In a closed-door fast-track trial in late 2018, he was found guilty of murder and SA. While Amanda and Raphael were fighting for their freedom in court, Guede quietly served his time. He became eligible for partial release in 2017 and took a sociology degree while in prison. By all accounts, he was a model inmate. In December 2020, having served the bulk of his term, Guede was allowed to finish his sentence with community service. And in November 2021, he was officially released from prison a free man after about 13 years behind bars. Upon release, Guede maintained his innocence in the killing. In a statement that many found disingenuous, he said, "I've got blood on my hands because I tried to save her, not kill her." To this day, he has never fully confessed or expressed remorse for the murder. He's attempted to fade into obscurity, at one point saying that he just wants to be forgotten. Guede is still the sole person held legally responsible for Meredith's death. Yet somehow the question still lingers. Did he act alone or with others? And they say that the answer depends on who you ask, but if you ask me, I think he did. I think he did. I don't think Amanda was involved at all, or her boyfriend at the time. And I think it's sad that it's left such a stain on her life, that she's the one that can't fade into obscurity. She should be the one who is able to step back. Amanda Knox became a global media sensation, sparked nearly unprecedented pre-trial coverage in Italy, Britain, and the United States. In Italy, newspapers dubbed Knox "angel face" in headlines and highlighted her youthful looks, even as they painted her as this cunning femme fatale. A British tabloid resurrected Amanda's teenage nickname, Foxy Knoxy, originally a reference to her agility in soccer, and imbued it with sexual connotations. So overnight, Knox was pigeonholed as an alluring she-devil or a cold-blooded liar. And these caricatures often overshadowed the actual evidence being discussed. The media narrative that took shape was as dramatic as a movie script. Amanda was portrayed by some outlets as a promiscuous, drug-using party girl who led her besotted boyfriend into a deadly sex game. Italian prosecutor Mignini fed the press these tantalizing morsels, hints of Knox's alleged erotic behaviors, her vibrator found in a drawer, the fact that she had multiple male acquaintances. And when Amanda exhibited any behavior that deviated from the grieving, demure image of an innocent, it was literally seized upon. For example, during a long wait at the police station on November 2nd, Amanda at one point did some stretching, which morphed into sensational reports of her doing cartwheels in front of horrified officers. In another instance, CCTV footage caught Amanda and Raphael exchanging kisses and affectionate touches outside the house in the hours after the murders. I'm sorry, but in moments of tragedy, don't you want your partner there comforting you? Tabloid stories wielded those images as evidence that she was a remorseless man-eater, flaunting herself wherever her friend had just died. Amanda later said that these narratives were absurd and hurtful. She was a confused 20-year-old whose behavior was more naive than nefarious. But the damage was done. Quote, "My innocence didn't save me because the media created a story, and people liked that story," unquote. She said, quote, "I was the dirty man-eater, Foxy Knoxy," unquote. And cultural bias played a huge role. The British media, identifying with their tragically slain countrywoman, often cast Amanda as the villain and Meredith as the angelic victim. British papers printed lurid rumors about Knox's sex life, at one point publishing an imaginary list of her past lovers. Italian media, for their part, relished the story of a beautiful foreign girl gone wild. There was a sense of bella figura versus brutta figura. Knox's behavior was judged as a kind of ugly, unfeminine conduct in the Italian cultural context. She did not comport herself as Italians might expect a wrongfully accused woman to. Meanwhile, American media, eventually, especially after the 2009 conviction, tended to rally to Knox's defense, seeing her as perhaps a victim of a miscarriage of justice abroad, emphasizing the dubious evidence. So, this transatlantic divide led to some tension, with Italian officials resenting what they felt was American interference or arrogance. But again, all of this still takes away from the tragedy that occurred for Meredith. Even the British tabloids, in their obsession to attack another woman, they're taking the focus away from the victim. I think we're actually kind of seeing this right now with the Idaho 4 case. Everyone keeps talking about the murderer, but no one is actually talking about the victims anymore. Everybody wants to see the evidence that is now being released and the body cam footage being released, and people are wanting to watch it. Meanwhile, the parents and the friends of the loved ones are just like, please stop talking about it. Please stop talking about him. He is disgusting. He is a murderer. Talk about our loved ones who passed. I think that when we sensationalize certain topics like this, we forget what we're even mad about because we're so focused on getting views, getting attention. But there was a young woman brutally stabbed in an area that should have been safe for students. She was trusting her neighbors not to bring around people with a criminal history. This should have all been about Meredith. But instead, because of the picture that the media wanted to paint, we totally forgot about her. I mean, I hear Amanda Knox, and I only really think of Amanda Knox. I don't think at all about Meredith. And I think that's the biggest problem here. We really need to start asking ourselves when we talk about true crime and cases and when we're seeing certain headlines in the media, we really have to start asking ourselves, like, who is this for and what is this really about? Because we're starting to lose the real picture. Granted, the story of Amanda Knox being falsely accused is a very, very, very important one to talk about because it could protect other people from getting wrongly accused or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it is an example of injustice. It is a really, really good example of what should not happen because Amanda is a victim in a lot of respects. And she's been so brave in speaking out against what happened to her. She's been so brave in sharing her story. We need to hear her story. But we also need to remember Meredith. We can't let the victims of true crime cases get forgotten in all of the salacious gossip. We just can't. We have to do a better job, in my opinion. That was my little rant for the day. I hope you guys liked it. Overall, the legacy of the Amanda Knox case is a combination of tragedy and hard won insight. It reminds us that international justice can be as fragile as the thin line of DNA on a blade, and that it takes diligence and integrity to discern truth from the tangle of human error. It also shows that people and systems can actually learn and reform. Meredith Kercher's story will forever evoke sorrow for a life unrealized. Amanda Knox's story will continue to spark debate, reflection, and hopefully positive change. In the end, one hopes that all the tears, trials, and tribulations were not in vain, but have rather illuminated a path to a more just and understanding world. A world where, in Meredith's memory, we strive to do better by both the living and the dead. So, what do you think about this case, guys? Have you watched the documentary? Have you watched the new series on Hulu? Please let me know your thoughts below. And I will likely have another cult video for you. I know you're hungry for those cult videos, but I really wanted to talk about this case today just because of how quickly, I don't know, I guess, I hate to make this about gender norms, but after the Diddy trials this year and everything we've seen with the Epstein situation, just all of these injustices where we are not critical enough on the men, where men are getting away with these terrible accusations. It just feels like we just totally forget about it. It gets swept under the rug. And in this situation, it feels like people became so obsessed with Amanda that they were hungry to just convict this young girl of anything and everything they could instead of doing due diligence and committing to discovering the truth. And now she is still vilified. It really makes you wonder, like, when will we just start being able to recognize our internalized misogyny? This goes for really, like, kind of anyone among any culture. Sometimes we have to recognize, like, wow, this is an internalized kind of subconscious point of view I have, and that is forming my reaction and opinions to the actual truth I'm receiving. Because it's really, really hard, especially in the cases of like these men like Diddy, who are beloved by so many people. It's really, really hard for a lot of people to switch that off. But when it's a random woman who is not a public figure, people are really, really fast to jump on board and make her the villain without proper evidence. And still to this day, people question her innocence. And it just makes me feel like it just isn't fair. And poor Meredith and poor Meredith's family, because her family was also misled and they probably still think Amanda did it. So I'm so curious at the debate that this video might spark. Please be respectful to each other in the comments. Whenever I talk about something that might be a little more controversial, I just like to say that. But you guys are usually great anyways, because you're the best. But with all that being said, do not forget to please share your perspectives down below. I really appreciate you being here today, and I hope that you guys are staying safe out there. Remember to always ask questions and always stay skeptical. I will see you in my next video very soon. Y'all have a great one. Have a very, very safe Labor Day if you're celebrating. Bye.